Thanks for tuning in. You're listening to the Shred Coach podcast with Tom Adams. Guy Wakutz, president of Alpine Shredders, a shred truck manufacturer based in Kitchener, Ontario, joins Tom on this episode. Guy shares the current state of the shred truck industry as it relates to supply chain issues, costs, and implications. And he also recommends how business owners need to think about acquiring a new truck in the current market.
Guy Wakutz, welcome to the Shred Coach podcast. I'm really glad you're here.
Glad to be here too, Tom.
Yeah, it's really good to have you here. So to set the stage for our conversation, tell me sort of in brief, because I know it's a long story, but tell me in brief your shredding industry story from when you first arrived in the shredding industry to where you are today. Just give me an overview of that story.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll try to keep it as short as possible. I started in 2006. I opened a mobile shredding company here in Waterloo, Ontario, Canada. I had been in business before, owned a couple businesses, and looked at this as a very profitable business, got into it, and then found out pretty quickly that tough business, that the zero to profitability may take 6 to 9 to 12 months. And unfortunately, I was undercapitalized. And so I made a decision pretty quick on to sell the business. And during that process, I worked with the company Axo at the time. They were now Alpine. Bought the equipment from them, and I helped them sell the equipment that I had with the business. And I ended up then working for them. And so the ownership team, great people. I worked for them, started in sales. That was in 2006, fall of 2006. And then worked my way through to sales management and marketing and director and to this current position right now where I was fortunate and promoted to president of this company and in June this year.
Yeah, that's really cool. So you're currently president of Alpine Shredders. And so that means you're smack dab in the middle of producing and creating trucks for the industry right now. So related, thanks for sharing that story because it gives us a good background on you. Like you've been in the industry a long time, but you started on the operator side before jumping to the manufacturer side. So can you provide, as we begin, some insight about the state of the current shred truck industry as you see it in terms of supply chain issues, pricing implications, the trajectory of features you're seeing? Just give us a sense from your unique point of view, what you're seeing in this world and how it's affecting things.
Yeah, it's in the transportation industry across the board, not specifically our small little niche industry of mobile shred trucks, but trucking as a whole is tough. I mean, they have the manufacturing process because of COVID and global supply chain has really stressed the transportation industry. And we're seeing limited truck allotment or chassis allotment per dealership and per different areas. So that's limiting our ability to get chassis. And as we build on the chassis, it limits our ability to manufacture the products. And so now there's long lead times, there's long sales pipelines, times for construction. And because of this, we're seeing increasing costs have gone up a minimum 10 to 15% across the board, sometimes even more. So that's unfortunate, but there's just so many global factors involved that you can't narrow it down to just one thing.
Right.
Ultimately, it's just taking longer. Everything is slowed down. I mean, we're so used to having just-in-time inventory and getting it right away and ordering it on Amazon and getting it the next day. That's not the case in the trucking of the transportation industry now. So if one of, our customers said, I'm going to go and I want to buy a chassis locally, they'll go to their local dealership and their dealership's going to say, it's going to be a year before you can get a chassis.
Wow.
As a manufacturer, we and our competition have trucks in queue and hopefully we have enough to fill the demand. But if not, it pushes orders out longer. And it's just the unfortunate truth of what COVID has done. And because of the global aspect of it, it'd be different if everything was made in the US or Canada, it was local, we could pick it up, but everything is so globalized now that it's slowing everything down.
So is it more than just the trucks? Is it also the equipment as you get chassis to build on? Is it more than just that limited truck allotment? Is it also all of the equipment related?
Oh yeah. It's so the fiberglass reinforced plywood, we build the bodies out and you'll see most trucks built that way. We have a 120-day lead time. Some of the other components, we have a 200 or 300-day lead time, but typically it was 2 or 3 weeks. So it's one of those things that we have to change our inventory. We've got to have a higher number of inventory. Not only that, for production, but for service as well. And that's across the board. And it could be something simple like wiring. Wiring harnesses are made in the Ukraine, and we know what is happening over in Europe and the Ukraine. So a lot of them are there. So that slows down that too. These trucks are great, but if they don't have a steering wheel because you can't source the steering wheel, it's not going to go down the road.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So I guess that then the peripheral question to that is that changing like I see it as the feature set that you're offering because of supply chain issues? Has it started to change people saying, well, I can't get that specific thing? Are you having to adapt features to a more simple machine, or are those features still just part of the package and you have to wait the 200, 300 days if that, or are people backing off on the feature requirements in order to get the truck within a certain period of time?
Yeah, not really. Not really. I mean, so we've heard about, the 10,000 pickup trucks that are sitting in empty lots because they don't have power seats or other things like that.
Right.
The chip shortage. Although there's thousands of chips in every piece of equipment and every chassis anyways, it's really, that part hasn't affected it. So the features haven't affected it. It's just raw goods.
Right. Okay.
So it's more general than it is specific.
Got it. Okay. So that gives us a sense of where we are in the world. The reality is things are slowing down. Prices have gone up 10 to 15% minimum. A lot of times, longer lead times, it's slowing things down. And so I think at this point in time, I want to shift more to in this current reality versus what it was 10 years ago. I don't think we're ever going back, or even 5 years ago. It's a new reality now. But how should shred operators think about acquiring a new truck? I sense there's a simple way to think about it, which is how much is it going to cost me and when do I get it with these feature sets on it? But from your perspective, I wonder if there's a more sophisticated way to think about it or approach to buying that many operators miss, especially in this new reality. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. So it requires more advanced planning. I mean, once again, I'm hearing information from all the customers that I have, the 200 or 300 customers that I deal with. And that used to be, they would bid on a contract. It would come up in 8 weeks. They'd be able to buy a piece of equipment to fulfill that contract, consoles,
Right.
parts, whatever. Now that's a little bit different. So when they think about acquiring a new truck, then they have to plan on when they can get the truck before they sign the contract or get the contract. It's kind of putting the cart in front of the horse, as awful as it sounds. So that's different. But more specifically, a shred truck is a tool, and a very specific tool. And if you need a 1/2 inch wrench, you have to, use it only for a 1/2 inch nut. So the shred truck itself's got to fit their needs. And so they have to go through basically a needs assessment, an honest needs assessment, to figure out what's the right piece of equipment that can, fit their needs. And so, yeah, that how much and when can they get it? Yeah, that's general, but they're not just going out and buying a car to drive it to work every day. This is their moneymaker. This is a tool, and it's very specific. So, they have to look at, just the basic things that I'm sure all the listeners have done before, which is look at the capacity, whether it's throughput's important or whether it's payload that's important. Do they have more purges or more scheduled routes? How far is it to the recycler? I mean, because if the recycler is a long way away, you may want a truck that has huge capacity, even though you're not filling it as much or filling it more. So these are all questions that they need to kind of know in advance. And then the biggest thing lately has been a lack of effective employees, because that's who runs this business. I mean, the owners run the business, but the actual nut and bolts are the drivers and the operators. So do you have availability of CDL drivers, or do you have to go non-CDL? And that could change your requirements on equipment too. And that's been a big change in the last 2 or 3 years. We went from a 50-50 CDL versus non-CDL in equipment sales. And now we're at probably 75% non-CDL and only 25% CDL. And I think there's going to be ebb and flow back and forth there. But right now, the biggest concern when I'm talking to owners is their operators and drivers, and getting them and getting reliable ones in. Oh, for sure. If you have good drivers, pay them well, treat them well, because you don't realize what you have until you lose them. And this is the biggest thing I hear from all the operators and owners out there.
Yeah, that's the same thing I hear in the coaching side of the equation when I I work with them in terms of thinking through the implications of that. It's the driver side that becomes really, really the core limiter or the constraint in the whole system. But I think what's really powerful about what you said is it's like the current reality is forcing people to, on that one end, to think about your drivers and what kind of drivers do you have, which leads back to the kind of vehicle throughput, payload, capacity, but even CDL versus non-CDL. But then you got to back that up. And this is, I think, the nuance that I think you've brought out, which is that ability to advance plan where you're going far enough in advance, even if you haven't won that big hospital contract or that big local whatever, that you're planning advance for when you're going to need capacity well enough in advance to pull the trigger on getting in the queue to even get equipment.
Well, absolutely. And once, like I said before, business owners are entrepreneurs, they're gunslingers, when they're back to the wall, they're going to work harder. So buying a truck in 6 or 8 months and then trying to fill it, it's not a bad thing. It just takes effort and hard work. And so, but that's planning. And, we're finding that the people that plan more typically are more successful in the long term as well.
Right. And so I think you've talked about it in the sense of, maybe smaller operators, that's a really broad assessment. But when people are getting up into their 5, 6, 7 trucks, do you feel like they're thinking differently, or how should they be thinking differently as this grows? And what are you seeing in the current, situation in terms of these people who have built successful shredding businesses, and they're, if they're operating 4, 5, 6 trucks, they're in the, they're generally in the, $2 to $3 million a year revenue range. There's some nice stuff happening there, but how are they thinking differently about trucks than, say, a newer operator?
Yeah. So when they are more advanced in their business and they understand equipment, they realize they have to have a fleet mentality. So they're buying the same type of chassis. They don't have an International or Freightliner or a Hino or Kenworth. They're sticking with one manufacturer so that they find out the local dealership they're close, because all these pieces of equipment are going to break.
Yes.
And at one point or another, because you're wearing them, you're looking them hard. And so you have to have one that's close, consistent. And then they start looking at very specific needs. So when you buy your first truck, it's a general truck. You've done your references, you've talked around, you've done as much as you can. You think you're going to buy the right piece of equipment. Buy the 4th or 5th or 6th or 10th. Yeah. You pretty well know exactly what you want as far as what the tool is supposed to do for you. Then it's getting very specific. Where's your local repair center? Where's your local chassis dealership? Do you have a on-time, full-time mechanic that can work on your equipment? And you should. Do you have a good relationship with the manufacturer itself and their service department? And can they walk it through you? And do they answer the phone? Simple things like this that become very important. And so they picked up they've gone through all the problems, and now they have the questions to their problems that they're looking for answers for as they mature in this industry, and they've got their 5th, their 10th, or more trucks sort of thing.
So that real distinction is thinking fleet versus the truck that I can buy to get started.
Absolutely. Yeah. And at that point, now you've got 5 fires. You've got 5 trucks. You've got 5 fires burning all the time. That's a bad analogy of this industry.
Yeah.
But they have to think about, they're all going to need preventative maintenance. They're all going to need service. They're going to need constant attention and repair. And if you don't do that, if you wait, if you're proactive, you put these fires out before they start. If you're reactive, you're going to be the guy that's going to be calling and screaming, and I need this right away, and this truck is down, and I can't fill this schedule. I'm going to be weeks behind. We've heard all that too. And so once again, listening to our best owner operators, the most successful, they have a really good preventative maintenance program. They have things nailed down really well, and they have good people working on their equipment every day. And so in the morning, everything is ready to go.
Yeah.
It's as close to 100% as they can. And so they eliminate that potential problem. Although problems do come up, because all commercial equipment is going to fail at one point or another. It's how you deal with it. It becomes important.
I feel like that sort of sets up what I was going to ask you, but I feel like it's just the opposite of it. But manufacturer agnostic, because I realize that, you're in a competitive industry and there's multiple manufacturers, but what mistakes are operators making when they buy a truck, whether they're first time operators or or they've got a bigger fleet. But even still, like a lot of times I feel like people, once they're either new into it, they make irrational decisions sometimes. And people have been in the game a long time, sometimes don't want to deal with the hassle of this next one. It's a hassle a lot of times to get the next truck. Are they making mistakes that you see from your perspective?
So mistakes are more attitude.
Hmm.
In reality, they a lot of customers, even if they've been in it for a long time and they're well seasoned business people, they did a little bit of lack of planning, like I mentioned before. They get price confused with costs and operating costs.
What do you
Sometimes they
mean by
don't
that?
do it. Well, regardless of the price, you have your monthly cost. And if your monthly cost is less, but the initial price is more, it's a better piece of equipment.
Hmm.
And so when you look at people that run equipment, bulldozers and trucks and graders and that sort of thing, they all look at running costs, not price, because the price is typically on a monthly basis. And so whether it's 5,000 a month or 6,000 a month, that's not as big a deal as if the running costs over 5 or 10 years, they'll recoup that. If it's
Got
more efficient, they'll save more fuel. So they'll recoup that as well. So you really, I know we get caught up on the price. We do, but ultimately most people aren't paying for it themselves. They're paying it through the bank
Right.
and funding company. And so it's just a monthly nut. And if they look at their equipment and look at the operating costs on a monthly basis and the efficiency of the truck, you should be able to, hopefully if you do your job right and you look at all the equipment, find the right equipment that suits you. Now, that being said, all of us that make shredding equipment, it's a small industry for mobile. We all build good equipment, and I'm not going to discredit anyone else. It's all good equipment out there. So it's really a matter of what is better for you and for your needs, and whether you can do some of the work yourself or whether you need someone to hold your hand through the equipment. But it's really, it's do your homework, talk with your accountant and once again, get that price versus cost clear in your mind what they actually mean.
Yeah, that's such an important distinction, price versus cost. And I think so often that's why I said there's some mistakes that still people come with because they think in their heads, oh, the truck is going to cost me X, but in terms of the price, but they're not spending a lot of time and energy thinking about that ongoing OpEx cost that's going to be part of the monthly nut of this machinery. Plus what you said earlier, preventative maintenance immediately out of the gate, getting that into the thinking about this piece of equipment that's coming.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
You mentioned talking to your accountant, but what other things should buyers come to the table with before calling you or another manufacturer? What should they have at their disposal in terms of knowledge, information, so that they can make the correct choice as to the right equipment for them? What else?
Yeah. And that's a big challenge because our customers are great business people. Some of them are green in this industry. Some are veterans. And so they have different ideas and questions about equipment. Some of them don't know anything about trucks. Other people know more. So I think that basic knowledge, doing as much research as they can to understand the equipment. And then the questions are not more about, when can I get it? How much is it? But specifically, what do you offer? Why do you differentiate in the marketplace? Why do you think your equipment is better? And every manufacturer can have a different story about that or a twist or whatever you want to call it. And we all do a good job. We just do something a little bit differently. But I think they need to know some of the stuff and do a little bit of homework. I talk about a lot of my customers, call these people that have been in this business for 10 or 15 years and they have tried different trucks and get their idea, be it good or bad. And so ask for references before they call the manufacturers. And, the other thing too is I would hope that they have a solid business plan put together first before they call us, even if they're not a startup, if they've been in it for years, at how this piece of equipment is going to fit their needs. So I'm not sure what else there would be there for, but really knowing their specific needs, right? And then when they call us, then we can help, we can assess what they need, and we can try to fit our equipment that will help with what they're looking for.
Right. Well, and the reality is trucks cost a lot for, for a lot of operators. This, besides maybe their house, this might be the biggest acquisition, or a commercial property. This might be the biggest thing they acquire, asset they acquire. And it's an economic decision, but it's also related to what we've already talked about. It serves a specific purpose. It's a tool for a specific outcome based on a set of criteria. I guess financially speaking, or economically speaking, are there rules of thumb that you have on the manufacturing side? Because we talked about price versus cost and what your annual or your monthly nut OPEX is on it. But are there rules of thumb? Should people be thinking about a truck as a 5-year payoff, a 10-year payoff? What kind of rules of thumb do you, especially with newer operators, use to help them think through the economics of a truck purchase?
None whatsoever, because
None.
everyone
Okay.
is so different. They're just so different. There's mom and pop that have worked in corporate. They're 55 and they're 60. They just want to be busy. They're going to be a 1 or 2 truck operator all their life.
Got it.
But there's someone that's, part of my language, full of piss and vinegar out of New York. The guy's 30 years old. He wants to take over the world. And so there are different requirements and specifics for what they're looking for.
Right.
Well, all of them are going to look at, this is not going to be like a house or like a retirement property or a car. This is a business decision. This is basically based on revenue and expenses, and it's a money making, and it's a business tool. So if they can afford 1 truck that makes them $150,000 a year or $200,000 a year in profit, well, then we're going to make 2 because we want to make more money. We want to grow this business. So relative to financing rules and economics, yeah, I think that's
interesting.
Everyone's so different. Like it's interesting, Tom. I hear everything, and then I see a lot of things where they change through time. So there are a lot of guys that will look at, a lot of larger companies that will look at, after 5 years, we're going to flip our equipment because they start wearing and they start becoming a little bit more expensive, and all of this stuff is not cheap. But so they try to flip them after 5 years. There are some that say, okay, I'm going to keep this truck. Then we have customers that have a truck for 15 and 16 years and have put a new chassis underneath it and done things like that. So I wish there was a rule of thumb, because it would make my job easier and help people get into it, but there really isn't. There's so many variables involved. And then from inner city to rural, to East Coast to West Coast, everything is different there too. So it's not, it's great because you can cater to your local market specifically, but there's no 5 steps to success.
Yeah. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And I think, the dilemma sometimes is, for all of us, we all want that simple formula to make our life make sense. But at the same time, because it's a business and there's so many various factors that come to play on the equation of the economics of a truck, 2 trucks, 3 trucks to build a business. I appreciate you saying there's no good rules of thumb, because everything's different, and which leads back to, in that case, because there's no sort of bottom line equation, you have to do your homework. You have to work with your accountant. You have to do your modeling. You have to do your planning to make sense of this acquisition that you're going to make of a big piece of equipment. Let's move over into ongoing operating stuff, because, you talked about it earlier. It's not just what you pay to buy the truck, it's how much it costs you going forward. Inherent in that are challenges and headaches. So what are some of the top challenges or headaches you hear from existing operators with their trucks? And then what possible solutions might you recommend? Can you give us maybe your top 3 or 4?
Yeah, absolutely. So with the equipment, number 1 by far is have a good maintenance program, have someone to do it religiously and diligently, and have someone that can service your equipment. So that by far is number 1, because if your equipment's down, it's not making you money. Number 2, it has always been about the drivers. So empower your drivers and your operators. Have them do some maintenance to the equipment. Have them know the equipment. Make sure they're properly trained. You'd be surprised that the phone calls we get from someone in the field that they were just told how to start the shredder and shred. They don't know anything about how the equipment works. They don't really have to, but they're barely in the baby stages of learning, and they're put out with a piece of equipment. So that becomes crucial too. And then, so the third thing, those two are probably 80% of the problems. The third thing would probably relate to would be a supply chain issue. Like, I got to wait 8 months for a truck. Well, that's ridiculous. I agree, but that's the way it is. Shipping of parts and that sort of thing can and cannot be a challenge. But, I don't think there's anything that's, I think most of the things now have been relative to COVID and the economic slowdown and the global supply chain issues. Beyond that, it's more of a servicing specifically the equipment, training people to operate it properly and to be efficient on the equipment. So I would say those two are 80% of the biggest headaches that we hear from, not just us, that's from all equipment that's being front end loaders, trucks, snow plows, like up here in Canada, that sort of thing. You got to be on top of it.
Yeah.
And if you're not, you're going to be putting out fires all day long.
Yeah, I think number one is self-evident, or it should be, but it seems to me that if that's one of the biggest issues you hear, it seems weird that people buy a significant piece of equipment that costs hundreds of thousands of dollars and yet don't have a maintenance program. So what's the gap there? Like, what is it? Just, oh, I don't think about this, or I'm too busy, or what's the piece that gets missed? Because that to me seems so overtly obvious on a piece of equipment that's tearing paper apart and more.
Yeah. And we think so too, but our shop is full of millwrights and mechanics and electricians and welders and that sort of thing. Tradespeople, they get that, but our customer is a smart, wise business person. And then sometimes he's not a truck guy. He's not an equipment guy. So he doesn't know anything. So education is crucial from top down to the bottom. So they got to know their equipment. They got to not be afraid of, rolling up their sleeves and getting their hands greasy. So they learn it. And some people just don't. And those are the people that have the most pain.
Right.
So it seems obvious to us, right?
Yeah.
But it's understanding they're going to get into this industry, typically successful in some industry in the past, and are okay financially to be able to afford a $250,000 truck. And a lot of them come from a corporate environment. So they're not used to it. So they got to learn that as well.
Right. The importance of that and implementing that. Well, that's been really helpful, Guy. That's just gives us some really powerful and unique perspectives. So make sure you got a maintenance program in place with all that comes with that. Somebody to do it regularly. Make sure your drivers are clear and understand how the equipment works, why it does, some of the basics to actually manage and deal with stuff, even simple maintenance stuff on it. And then be aware that supply chain issues, it doesn't matter how much you're desperate. Supply chain issues are a reality and they'll continue to be. Those big three. Is there any final one that you think is worth restating, or any other one that you feel like is just like cherry on top?
I don't know. I mean,
okay.
I think a lot of people, they know who they are, but you've got to understand who you are and who you're not. And that's part of it too. And so whether you are happy with 2 trucks or whether you're happy with the fleet, then there's challenges that, a lot of, some of our customers want to, make lots of money, but they don't want the headaches associated with lots of equipment. But the two don't jive. So you gotta make a choice. So either you're really directly involved and you're spending a lot of time and there's rewards for that. So the relative to the equipment, no, I don't think there's anything that's
got it.
There's not a cherry on the top here, Tom.
Perfect. It's just being smart and wise about it all. Well, we've kind of come to the end of our time together, but I was digging in your LinkedIn profile and I discovered that before you got into the shredding world, you seemed to be very much in the golf world. So I wanted to ask a question. Whatever you did in the golf world, how has that impacted your understanding the way you do the work you do today? Is there a connection? Is there a correlation?
Sure. And I think it's a personality thing. I started as a club professional and a golf club manager, worked into general management of golf operations, and then opened my own golf company. I had that successful golf company for 10 years. But it's really not about, it's more about the learning. Teaching is difficult. Teaching golf is even more difficult. And understanding the needs of the customer and not trying to make them perfect, but make it work for them. But it's about business. It's about selling a service, a product that's going to help someone else. And, and the golf thing just happened to be where I landed. Brief stint in college and university. And I had great mentors throughout my whole career. And I think that's crucial in this industry too, because we have a lot of mentors in this shredding industry. And if you can pick up a couple of mentors, it will really help things. And everyone's willing to help you as well. So yeah, that golf thing is part of me. It doesn't identify who I am.
Yeah.
I like to think of myself as more of a business person than a golfer. And based on my golf ability these days, you'd laugh to know what I did before. So,
Well, Guy, I really appreciate your time, your input, and your perspective. One of the things I've known about you throughout the years is because of your unique history, the way you've moved through the industry from operator side to sales side and then to running Alpine. I've always appreciated your perspective and your wisdom and your humility about that too. And so thank you for sharing that with us today. It's been really helpful to me, and I know it will be helpful to everyone listening. So I appreciate you being here. Thanks so much. And yeah, continued success.
well, thank you so much, Tom, and you too.
Thanks again for listening to the Shred Coach podcast with Tom Adams. Make sure to visit theshredcoach.com for regular functional training modules directly from Tom, and subscribe to our email list so you can have first access to brand new stories, insights, and strategies from trusted shredding and business professionals.